Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Performance Pulse podcast. This episode is a special one for me. It was recorded back in October, right before I set things in motion with my business and future episodes. My guest today is someone who had a huge impact on me, both personally and professionally. Josh Milligan is a former college football player and a cognitive performance specialist for the U.S. Army at Fort Bragg. At just 25, he's wise beyond his years with a deep understanding of mindset, athletic performance, system development, and the psychology behind human behavior. Our conversation was everything I envisioned for this podcast: insightful, raw, and packed with game changing perspectives. We talked about mental performance, navigating adversity, and the balance between discipline and adaptability. Josh didn't just shape how I think about performance, he helped me reframe how I attack my life moment to moment. This episode sets the standard for the type of guests I want to bring to this podcast moving forward. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Josh Milligan. Josh, how you doing today, man?
It's good, man. Antone, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. It's kind of awkward now that we're on camera because we usually have conversations almost every day that last a very long time. So I'm really excited to have the performance aspect added on to that. I'm here to be my authentic self, so thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and from talking to you, man, I immediately established that you were really intelligent. You had a really unique story. I love your background. I view you as a pioneer in this space, especially being here so young. And so after about 3 or 4 times talking to you, I was like, I got to get this guy on a podcast. And that was absolutely a priority for me. And so I'm just excited for you to have the opportunity to share your journey with the world. My first question for you is, talk about how you got here. And was this planned or is this an organic process?
Yeah, that's a really good question to start it off, man. So kind of just start from the beginning. I have 7 siblings. I'm from Austin, Texas, and football was my life. That's the only thing that I cared about. That's the only thing I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And then I realized very quickly, my sophomore year, that I had dislocated my hip during a football game. And I realized that because of my size, I wasn't the biggest, I wasn't the strongest, I wasn't the fastest, but I had to find my edge. My edge was that I could get as many mental reps as I could, no matter where I was, no matter how I was feeling. I knew that I could be in the game at all times. So that was my first kind of real set into what mental performance is, what sports psychology is. And then after that, I was blessed to go to Beloit College and play football for 4 years. I had a great time there. I learned a lot about leadership myself and sports psychology. That was my first time in which I took my first sports psychology class, and I had to do it on my own. So I went into class one day and I was like, this isn't for me, but I know that I wanted to still do something in psychology. So I spoke to some of my admin about, hey, what can I do in order to still get my credits, but make sure that I'm doing it for me? So they said, hey, you can create your own course, but you have to create a syllabi, you have to create different types of resources, you have to create your own homework, all these different types of things. And luckily I was so driven to, learn more about sports psychology that I got it done, really. So then from then on, graduated from Beloit College in 2021. Then right after that, I went straight to University of Denver, where I got my master's in sport and performance psychology. And that's where everything really just came into fruition. I still didn't really know if I had a plan. I know that I wanted to stay in the sports psychology program or in the background, but I just didn't know what it would actually look like. So I love baseball. I love the science behind it. I love the definition of what people think of as failure, really. So I ended up moving to Tampa, Florida. Unfortunately, some things didn't work out, in which it really had me settle down and think about, what is the performance that I'm putting on every day? And I really had to break it down into real small things and make sure that I was doing the right things every single day to make sure that I could get where I needed to go. So unfortunately, like I said, the things in Tampa didn't work out. So I talked to my mentor, Dr. Mark Ayogi, which is one of the co-directors of the program in Denver. And he said, hey, one of the really cool things about our job is that we can pick up contracts. And he's like, would you, be willing to do something somewhat out of your comfort zone, but still in the realm of performance psychology? I said, yeah, sure, of course, I love this. This is my passion. He said, okay, well, the Army has it. Good luck. And he was like, make of it what you can. So I ended up, finding a contract and ended up moving out here to Fayetteville, North Carolina. And that's kind of where you and I met. So that's kind of my journey so far. But I learned a lot along the way. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here. I'm really grateful for my journey. And I know that at 25 years old in this space, that my journey has just begun. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, and it's really cool to witness it in live time. happy that we've crossed paths. And I believe the best yet to come, especially from a collaborative effort. But love your story. Very much relates to mine quite a bit as far as being an athlete, transitioning into becoming a professional and going through adversity. But talk about some of the methods that you apply with some of your athletes and how you apply them throughout this process of getting to where you're at now and overcoming adversity.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I like to bring self-awareness up. And the reason why is because when people become more self-aware, they have the ability to not only just know about themselves, but share their story with other people. And, you know, the human condition is to connect on all different types of levels. So the method here is to really just create a connection around who they are, who I am, and what we can be together in this space at all times. And the more times that we have those strong relationships with other people, it allows us to have a sense of community, but also like togetherness and teamwork against hard things that come on through our lives. Even though I may not know exactly what someone is going through, I know that the connection that we create are the things that propel them forward over things like adversity, over things some things like domestic violence, past traumas, sometimes just confidence issues, things of that nature. All those types of things can really be defeated just by having a good connection with other people. And then also, one of the things that I always say is that we are using multiple mental skills, 2 to 3 mental skills at any given time. So in what ways can we optimize those things to make sure that we're, 1, fully in the moment, and 2, can accomplish any task that we have in front of us. So I think about in what ways are we actually becoming task oriented, and in what ways are we connecting, and in what ways are we getting better every single day.
Do you think that you got the brain going?
Good.
Really into your practice.
This is how we start up.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that being task oriented and valuing relationships can sometimes contradict each other, or like they interfere with one another? It's like you want to get the task done by any means, to the point where you start neglecting the human connection or giving people your actual attention. So you just want to focus on the task at hand. Have you seen that happen before?
Yeah, I believe that to an extent, the more that we become task oriented to the things that we want to do, unfortunately, there are things that we have to sacrifice from the relationships that we have with other people. So I believe that the more that you have, or the more opportunity that you have to share your story, to share your goals, or to share your tasks with other people, especially if you have good relationships with those people, they will understand and they will actually encourage you to, you know, sometimes make some distance between you and that person to make sure that you can be the person that you want to be. It creates a more altruistic view versus an empathetic view. Sometimes we connect too hard on the empathetic level, and then we've created some type of trauma bond or bond to where we become emotionally attached rather than altruistically attached, to where it's like, actually, I want the best for you. I want you to achieve everything that you've ever wanted to achieve in your life. So that's where I like to do it from, is like, share your story, share your goal, and those people will actually push you to go wherever you need to go.
2 things stand out from that. And I think about transparency and having the self-awareness and the courage to tell the people that are close to you or involved in your process what you're going through, or even being clear, I need space, I can't give you this time right now. And just, if you're open and you're honest, regardless if it may not be what someone wants to hear, they have to accept it. And they have to respect the fact that you took the time to acknowledge that. And what that does over an extended period of time is it draws a line in the sand and having boundaries within relationships. And you obviously want to keep people close, but what those boundaries do is puts in a perspective, this is where I'm at and I need my space in order to give you my space and my other responsibilities, my optimal attention. Unconsciously, or try to bite off more than we can chew and giving things attention. And now our focus is spread too thin, and now we're doing nothing at 100% because we have these obligations to people, in which these situations could have been much better managed if you had just been clear and transparent in the first place in regards to where you were at. And then, as we discuss often, it's the compound effect of now you're overwhelmed, and now all these aspects of your life begin to take a hit because you're just not being clear with the people around you as to what the hell you have going on. Love how you brought that up in regards to the work that you have to do in the balancing of relationships, because I think it applies to everything.
And also, like, I think you pulled up a good point of communication is actually a skill. So the more that you work on having vulnerable conversations, of having vulnerable conversations with other people, but also yourself, you can actually become a more authentic you over time. But the thing is, vulnerability is so hard to do nowadays because we always have this belief of that you should be hard, of you should be strong, which you are those things when you are vulnerable because you're putting yourself out there for the world to kind of criticize you. You know what I mean? That takes courage. That takes actual power and vulnerability. So the more that you can be vulnerable in your own authentic self, the more that you can have no regrets, the more that you can just be yourself in all aspects of life. That's another method that I try to do with my athletes or soldiers or whoever it is like, if you want to be your authentic self, if you feel like your authentic self is on the court or on the floor or on the field of competition, how are you just going to not be vulnerable? You know, you're vulnerable every time you put on your helmet. You're vulnerable every time you put on your cleats because, you know, at the end of the day, you could lose. You could lose your one-on-one matchup with somebody, and that's a vulnerable place to be at, seriously. So, yeah, man.
The micro game. There's like a micro game within the larger game.
Yeah, man.
But you talked about vulnerability. I saw your David Goggins book in the stack, and he's obviously a juggernaut in regards to mental performance. But you talk about vulnerability, and especially when you're dealing with the mindset of a warrior or soldiers in your workspace, right? And so, with you being so young and just going through life, it could be difficult at times to connect. So how do you connect in your workplace and get people to be vulnerable so that you can learn and optimally help them?
So the biggest challenge that I've noticed so far is that, one, I'm a civilian. These soldiers and officers and kind of like higher up, what I've seen, what I believe, some of the conversations I've had is that they may not trust us as well because they don't understand what they're fully experiencing. Some of the guys that we have on staff are former military, and you can see how quickly they just connect with them. Also, I'm coming in a lot later than everyone else, so this is kind of like a little bit more of the outsider view, still trying to work their way inside as well. But yeah, the reluctance to attempt to connect on their end is very difficult, but also for me, it's just like, okay, I have to understand that because of my positionality, because of my age, because of where I come from, because of me not having any experience in this field, that there will be a lot of ambivalence and reluctance in the beginning. And I have to accept that fact. Because now that I've accepted that fact, I know that, okay, since I don't know what they're going through, it's time to be curious about what their human experience is. So one of the things that I always do to defeat that challenge of reluctance is just lead with curiosity. Make sure that I fully understand what that human's experience is rather than the soldier's experience. Because at the end of the day, these soldiers, they're humans first. And if we treat them just as soldiers, they're going to start dehumanizing themselves, which can be kind of scary because we know that holistically, we need to be able to take care of ourselves as people before we become soldiers, or else our soldier performance will just be at a detriment, really. And we won't be able to be our full selves. We'll be a little bit scarier than usual. We'll make a lot more mistakes. And we won't have that sense of community with others because we feel like we can't fit in because we're not like our human self first, or we can't be our human self first whenever we're being our soldier self. So,
Man, it's funny how when you talk, I'm thinking about all these concepts and these different methods of how to get the most out of people and bring teams together. Performance obviously being the name of the game, but within that, I think about the micro wins a lot.
Yeah.
How do you break down what someone needs to do on an individual level, okay, as a human first, to then be a soldier and frame it so that get disconnected from the bigger picture? These are the things you need to focus on now that will then allow you to handle your initial responsibilities to where now we can begin focusing on your job.
one of the things that I like to do is the power of reflection. I like to bring that out just because a lot of people have already felt the feelings of fulfillment in one place or another. It might have been really small, but the times in which you feel that awe or wonder or this is who I truly am, those things stick with you a lot more than just all the sucky times. So one of the things that I usually ask is just tell me about your best self. Tell me about when's the last time you felt like that. What were you doing? Who was around you? Who pushed you to be that person? What was your environment demanding of you to? I get a variety of things, but then I say, if you were able to break it down into really small steps, of what that entire day looked like or what that entire experience was, do you think that you could replicate that? And some people say yes, some people say no. And then I say, okay, well, what are the things that are in your control of actually making that thing happen again? Because at the end of the day, we know from a sports psychology background that if we do something correctly over and over again, we know that it gets better over time. Our outcome becomes better over time. So if we're talking about micro wins, it's about what are the things that make us more confident every single day, that bring us to our full authentic self, but our full most protected self at all times too. So one of the things that I like to bring to athletes is, what does success look like for you, and then how can you replicate success over and over again? So we call it like the success checklist that I got from Brian Kane. He has he's a mental performance guy too in the MLB. He talks to the soldiers, he talks to athletes about like, what are the very small things that build resilience, that build that cognitive functioning on a higher level every single day. So a majority was just like building routines around like what we create as wins, so that we can build more resilience, we can build more confidence, and we can build a little bit more of a true self over time, consistently over and over again. We start doing that in the mornings, we start doing that pre-performance, post-performance, and then also, before we're done for the rest of the day, is having some type of reflection period about, did I actually win the day every day, So, yeah.
Win the day, that's a model that I live by.
Yeah.
What's important now, when I look at how I set goals, I'm big on having a vision and writing it down. And my approach throughout my entire life has always been very macro in regards to knowing where I want to be in 5 years, 10 years, and what that looks like, and what the milestone looks like. But as you get older and you begin learning that there's going to be roadblocks and how you pivot in the patterns throughout the past, it's like you can have an understanding of where it is that you're trying to go. And having a vision is great because it gives you some direction.
Yeah.
But you really have to establish that and then reverse engineer it and work backward into what actions and behaviors daily can you commit to and do at a high level, and what impact do they have on you being your best self. And so it's like, what does that ideal day look like? Now, how frequently can you replicate that? So it's not just a matter of like, did I win the day, but the compound effect of stacking days.
Yeah.
And it may be 6 months, a year, 3 years before you see a promotion, an increase in pay, or you even have something tangible to define your work. But there's nothing negative that's going to come from the fact that you are stacking days, and your time will come. And so just staying ready. But aside from that, being so focused on what's in front of you now that you're not getting too excited about reaching a milestone in which it's interfering with your ability to do what's in front of you, because you begin to get a little arrogant when things start going your way.
For sure.
You start taking shortcuts. So just being able to stay the path all the way through and detach from the outcome.
Yeah.
I don't need anything. But if I have something, it doesn't matter. I have to keep on going because it's bigger than this.
Right.
I feel like that's really at the core of where the micro game is won. And it's interesting because you can get the micro game misconstrued very quickly, because it's like, okay, I'm doing what I need to do today, but if you have no direction, what value does that have? I think it can suit every individual to stimulate their mind and exercise, but you have to be working and building towards something. But obviously I talked about the micro and the macro perspective on success, but how do you define success as a whole? And is there a pinnacle for you in your industry where you'd be like, I made it now?
My definition of success is, one, I know that whenever I do a session, I might be as prepared as I can, and I might have the greatest thing that I believe that will just change somebody's life, but at the end of the day, we're in front of humans and they might interpret that as ineffective. So I stopped relying my success on whether my athlete or soldier understood it, but whether I came and was my authentic self at all times during that session. Just because, like I said, we're in front of people. Those people will have different me and you could have the same message right now. They would never understand what I would have, but they would completely understand what you have. But it could be just dependent on the person and the way that you relay that message. So for me, it's more about success is, one, having an alternative of how to, give out my message just in case my first one doesn't have it. And then two, the preparation in that. the preparation breeds your performance at all times, right? So the more that you can prepare for whatever performance that you're having in front of you, you will probably have the outcome that you want, but you still have to make sure that the journey to get to that actual performance is just as effective, you're just as committed to that thing, just as you are to the performance itself.
And what's the pinnacle for you?
The pinnacle,
And there may not be a right or wrong answer. I'm just curious as to how do you define success as someone that teaches these models and this philosophical approach to attacking life? At what point is enough for you? Or do you have X amount of money that you want to make? Or is there a role within a certain organization or your own practice? What does that look like? Or if you did that, did you make it now? You know what I'm saying?
I think it depends, man. Every time that you reach that pinnacle, you realize that there's still another pinnacle, you know? So Michael Gervais talks about like mastery, about how there's
Big
like...
fan of his podcast.
Yeah. Michael Gervais is really good, man.
For sure.
Michael Gervais talks about like, you have your defining moments of like, yes, this is who I am, but you have no defining moment of like, I'm at God level or something like that. You're just at a sense of mastery of like, okay, I understand what it takes now, but how long can I be committed to this lifestyle? And what I realize is that it's not about always restarting, but it's just about recommitting to the day every single day. That's how you win the day. That's how you're successful. If you know that you committed, 4 or 5 times out of the week, of course it's not 7 times out of the week, but how do we make that 6 or 7? And then that's when you become more successful. It's just like, that's when you become like a master of yourself, right? It's the entire self, not just the performance, and it's being successful every single day and noticing that, okay, I was successful today, I was successful that day, but I think I could have did a little bit more. That's what I define the pinnacle of success is, noticing that you made it, but then it's like, there's still more. You always have more in the tank. As long as you're alive, you have more in the tank. There's always more.
And so you really have to create a new framework for how you define your happiness, and you can't align your happiness with your professional success. You have to love what you do and just embrace that journey and be willing to work day in and day out, whether you're going to receive $1 million or whether no one knows what the hell you're doing. And if you're able to continue to work on that and persist, I think that is success in and of itself, just because you found something that you love that you're willing to commit to doing. I love that approach, and so much as I'm just maturing, it's just part of getting older and learning. It's that there's not a pinnacle. I'm fortunate to have done a handful of different things and be able to now reach a new step where they're beginning to intersect into one role that is turning into a niche that is me, and it's uniquely me, and I believe that can be my value to the marketplace. To find myself at that position throughout my professional journey, that is the greatest blessing in and of itself. And so just to express my gratitude, it's like, what can I do to just make the most out of this situation? And I think this is a natural progression for all athletes is, I can't run anymore. We stopped working. So now I have to focus on the smaller habits that are just going to allow me to write my best, to manage, to lead, to speak. And so it really turns out to be what I'm doing day to day and how I'm eating and staying hydrated. And so there's just such an emphasis on now, and when you're present is when you're really alive. And even with your values, like your values tell you, despite what your values are, that doesn't mean your running life is over, right? You just have to create, okay, so if this is done for right now, what's next? Like you said, being in that moment and understanding where you're at, where you've been, and then where you're going to go, allows you to live in that moment and live your most authentic self at all times. So I love that, man. That's a good perspective to have. I appreciate it, man. I am so excited to ask you this two-parted question. What is the biggest misconception that the public has on high performers, celebrities, athletes, special forces? Like when you think about a high performer and what people think it entails and what the glory is versus what it really is. Especially because you've worked with people in all those spaces, you understand high performance to the utmost degree.
It's ugly. It's ugly and it's hard. Because we talked about this yesterday. It's like you're really in the trenches every day. And your actual performance is, unfortunately, the misconception is that people think that like the only time you hit your peak or the aha moment is when you're in front of like 100,000 people hitting the game-winning shot. When, unfortunately, like just to get to that one shot took 4 million shots, 400,000 shots. You know what I mean? So just to get to this place of where people think, oh, like they do this all the time, it's so easy. It wasn't. Just to stay committed is hard. Like everything that an elite athlete, a performer does is hard every single day.
Every day the rent's due.
Every day the rent is due. Even Tom Brady says you become more of a high level performer when you do more good than you and do less bad.
Facts.
It's just that simple. You know what I mean? So putting it in that standpoint, that's the biggest misconception that I've seen so far, is that the average person doesn't know what all it takes on an everyday level to be great. Like, that's the scary part. Greatness is so high above the minimum standard nowadays to where it's like, oh my gosh. But we don't understand, one, what it takes to be great, and then two, that greatness is inside of all of us. We just have to unlock it, and we have to commit to it every single day.
Yeah, the bar is low, which puts into perspective how quickly you can begin making some progress in your life.
Yeah.
By just doing very simple things.
Yeah.
Waking up at the same time, making your bed,
Yeah.
exercising,
Yeah.
staying well groomed,
Yeah.
dressing right,
Yeah.
starting conversations up with new people,
Yeah.
learning a new topic.
Yeah.
And if you do that, good things can start happening.
Right.
If the bar's low, it's all right, well, I can start winning too.
Right.
It's not like everyone has degrees out here and everyone's
Yeah.
becoming these human robot hybrids. No, we're not there yet. Information has never been more accessible, man. But within your message, because cognitive performance specialists, sports psychologists, they are not accessible to the public.
No.
You work in very specialized groups, or people can work with you one-on-one
Yeah.
on a private level, right?
Yeah.
But if you just had a message to the average person that just wants to improve performance in the course of their life, where they can apply your methods, what would you say to that person?
I would say that one day there's going to be a point in your life to where you're going to look back and say, damn, I could have did this, this, and that. And then you're going to have to sit with the fact that you chose not to. Despite what your environment told you, despite people talking bad on you, despite the lack of resources that you might have had at that time, you still had a little bit more control than what you thought you had. So what are you going to do now in order to make sure that you can be the best person, the best version of you that you can be? And I know that sometimes whenever they hit this point, they say, oh my God, this is my potential. And it gets scary to realize like your true potential. You know what I mean? I've had times in my own life where I've been like, oh wow, I was 16, 17, 18 years old. I'm like, I think I can be a doctor.
Yeah.
That's like top 1% of the 1% in the world,
Yeah.
man. So when you think about that, like,
How old did you say you were?
I was like 16 or 17 years old when I realized
I
this.
have a point about that.
And I was truly afraid. And something that I wrote a while ago, I wrote a poem about how the other side of fear is greatness. Because fear will hit you every single day. In one way or another, fear is there. It's always present. You're a human, right? It's just part of the human nature, the human condition to be afraid. But also, it's a part of the human nature and condition to one day stand up and say, I'm not going to let fear stop me from being who I want to be. So yeah, I'll share that with you whenever we're done with this. But
Yeah.
yeah, man. I read that every single day. That's like my mantra. It's like greatness is on the other side of fear. And all it takes is just waking up every day and recommitting back to your process, recommitting back to success every single day. So yeah.
That's powerful, man. I live by that. On the other side of fear is greatness. I've had a handful of youth athletes that I've worked with. Most recently, a cousin of mine who's getting recruited by some pretty big schools playing baseball. And it's funny, as you begin getting attention, colleges, like people start really noticing what you have to offer. And it's fascinating how in your mind, sometimes you turn into a little bit of a prima donna. You want to pick your spots in regards to when you want to try. Or you start thinking about what they're saying negative about you. You're acknowledging that. I don't want to go to this camp because, oh, they're saying this, and I want to wait until I'm better. Now you're neglecting aspects of yourself due to perception, but that is a fear.
Yeah.
It's been established
Yeah.
that you now have something, and are you content? It's very easy to get content because sometimes people just want confirmation. Fear is the barrier. And are you cool with just being good enough? Okay, maybe you are. You're afraid to take the leap, but you're content, so you don't really want to be great. The truth will always rise to the surface. I could tell you having affirmations in which is just like, oh, this is my actual destiny, which really changed my trajectory, bringing tears into my eyes of being so overwhelmed because it was I didn't know I had the capacity to even dare to dream that big. But again, I was frightened by it, willing to take on the challenge, of course, but I think that fear, more often than not unconsciously, is a driving force behind our behaviors. And so, as you said, it is hard to be great, man.
Yeah.
That is a sacrifice that not many are willing to take.
Yeah.
But just recognizing if you are willing to go on that journey, that you get very comfortable being uncomfortable and being on your heels.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, what you're going to find is, regardless of what it is that you're trying to achieve, you're going to become a very resilient being and very difficult to kill.
Yeah.
And that's when you become dangerous, and that's when I believe you can really start being successful.
Yeah. At any given time, we are either approaching or avoiding something. So what are we actually avoiding that we know will actually bring us into that next step of our life? And a majority of the time, you can realize that I'm the one who's destroying my future self. I'm the one who's destroying myself now. I'm the one who's holding myself back. I tell people, you are your biggest obstacle, but you are your biggest supporter and weapon. But it depends on what you're approaching and what you're avoiding. What's your mindset,
For sure.
Yeah, man.
So I have one last question for Josh, but before we wrap things up, I did just want the viewers to take away from this episode. We live by performance, not just in our profession, but in our lifestyle. And just having a clear state of mind, being consistent, and most importantly, valuing relationships. When you're going through something, please share with someone, express yourself. It is really important to do that, and it will really almost just let all that out of you and allow you to find clarity. And lastly, you never know what someone's going through or the words of confirmation that someone may need to hear. And especially if you're in a managerial or a leadership position. And I say that because Josh and I started our job about a week and a half apart, and I recognized that he was a little younger than me, and me being a little isolated, brand new to a pretty tenured staff, I made it a point to just let Josh know that I recognized his intelligence and I see a lot of potential, and I would like to learn from some of his methods, as I believe we all need a coach or a counselor, a therapist, psychologist in our life. And so for me to acknowledge that I see what he brings to the table and be willing to learn, it has added a lot of value in my life, and just being able to have conversations about these really complex topics. So it is very beneficial. And so just open your mind up to the world of psychology, sports psychology, performance, look to push yourself, and value relationships. And if you do that, I believe you can provide some direction and begin achieving the things that you want, or just have a better quality of life. So that's all I got, but I want to give the floor to you as you ended. Is there a mantra or a mission statement that you live by that allows you to do what you do?
I have tattooed on the back of my arms. On this side it says live by the sword. On this side it says die by the sword. And it's essentially like the ultimate commitment to my own self. I've realized over the amount of 25 years, not long, that I've been on this earth is that the more that I take care of myself, everything else in my entire life and the people that are around me get better in general. My 3 values are initiative, adaptability, and effort. So if I'm committing to initiative and adaptability and effort every single day, the relationships that I have with people get better, my own intellect gets better, the way that I see the world gets better, I get more optimistic about my life and other people's lives, and I still have that altruistic viewpoint on the world. And yeah, man, like that's kind of what keeps me grounded and motivated. It's like we want the best for not only yourself but everybody. And I think that unfortunately we have our own, agendas to other people's lives, which can get kind of scary because they don't deserve that. They deserve people who are completely supporting them because of the person that they are and not because they want something from them. So yeah, man, that's always kept me on the straight and narrow. That's always kept me grounded, and that's always kept me just hungry to be the best. And I'm not saying like the best around other people. I'm talking about the best me that I can be at any given time.
Hey man, I appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
Coming on this episode. Performance Pulse, really looking to take it up to the next level. Phenomenal episode. Let me know what you think. Follow me, Antone G. Wilson, on all platforms. That's all I got. Checking out Coach Wilson. Win the day, y'all.
Peace.